The film begins in a school setting, right after the end of a class. As the students will be taking the university entrance exam next year, Mr. Yoshuda reminds the class to enjoy themselves while they still can. Hori seems uninterested in what the teacher is saying because she was teased by him earlier that morning for having a small chest. However, she is a beautiful girl, excels in her studies, and often receives phone number requests from other boys through her friend, Yuki, but she usually rejects them all. While they were talking, one of her classmates named Toru appears and invites everyone to go karaoke, but Hori continues to decline the invitation. Suddenly, Miyamura shows up out of nowhere and returns Hori's lost phone. Due to his quiet nature, everyone thinks he's a genuine otaku. Hori hurriedly runs home, only to find out she has chores to do. Since her mother often works overtime, Hori takes care of all the household tasks. After tidying up the house, she goes to pick up her younger brother Soda. The next morning, while doing laundry, she suddenly hears Soda calling for her. She quickly rushes out and finds him with a nosebleed. Worried about her brother, she forgets about the person who brought him home. Later, she invites him into the house to express her gratitude. After a conversation, she discovers that he is Miyamura, the quiet classmate. He is way too different from himself in school. This surprises Hori greatly, and because she can't believe it, in school, she invites Miyamura to her house the next morning under the pretense that Soda wants to meet him. Although he appears awkward, he agrees. After visiting Hori's house several times, she realizes that he is not just a bookworm and his academic performance is quite poor. Moreover, his personality in this appearance is very different outside of class. While watching a commercial together, Hori sneakily notices his beautiful eyes. They then plan to go to the supermarket together the next day. But the next day, Hori has a meeting, so she asks Miyamura to buy discounted eggs for her. Due to time constraints, he takes a shortcut, removes his glasses, and jumps over a fence, accidentally running into Yuki. That evening, while having dinner together, Miyamura tells Hori about the coincidental encounter with Yuki. Hori feels a bit sad because she doesn't want anyone else to know Miyamura's true appearance beside her. After saying that, she awkwardly leaves. Miyamura quickly understands the situation and says that he also likes her personality and appearance when she was at home. Hori feels awkward because Miyamura could easily say cheesy things while maintaining a calm expression. Miyamura also concludes by complimenting Hori as being cute, leaving her speechless. Since then, they start talking to each other more, and through their conversations, Hori discovers that Miyamura has a large tattoo on his side. As they become closer, Toru decides to bring up the subject and ask about the relationship between Miyamura and Hori. Miyamura initially denies it because he believes he's not worthy of Hori. Miyamura also questions Toru and finds out that he has feelings for Hori. Through this conversation, both Miyamura and Toru become closer. Toru learns the secret that Miyamura has tattoos and earrings. In a conversation on the rooftop, Toru decides to confess to Hori, and Miyamura encourages him. After that conversation, Miyamura intentionally avoids Hori to facilitate an opening for Toru. Thanks to that, Toru takes the opportunity and arranges to meet Hori to confess his feelings. That evening, Miyamura waits for Hori anxiously. She finally returns and asks to speak with him privately. Contrary to his expectations, she doesn't dismiss him but instead wants to confirm if what Miyamura said about not being worthy of her is true. As for Toru, she has already rejected him. Miyamura then confesses and feels insecure because he doesn't believe that he is deserving of her. Hori feels self-pity because Miyamura thought that way about her, so she headbutts him and then asks him to continue coming to her house every day. The next day, while coming back from the market together, both of them talked to each other, and Miyamura discovered that she was completely clueless about current trends. When they got home, Hori encountered her mother, and she confided in her about Miyamura. Her mother appeared happy and expressed a desire to meet him. She asked for Miyamura's real name, but Hori suddenly realized that she only knew his last name and not his first name. The next morning, while sitting and contemplating this issue, she imagined herself asking him directly, but hesitated. Hori even stood outside the changing room, hoping someone would call Miyamura's name, but no one did. That evening, she went to the board displaying the top-performing students and thought that if Miyamura excelled academically, she would have a chance to see his name there. She coincidentally bumped into Toru and immediately asked about Miyamura, but he ran away because he was still hurt by the confession failure yesterday. That night, Hori planned that the next day, during Miyamura's introduction to her mother, she would learn his name. The next morning, Miyamura arrived and met Hori's mother, who welcomed him warmly. He introduced himself to Hori's mother with his full name before Hori and Toru headed home, which frustrated Hori a lot. She had hinted in various ways for him to reveal his name, but it didn't work. Due to Hori's strange behavior, Miyamura started thinking that she was paying attention to someone else, and with no other option, Hori had to tell the truth. After learning the truth, Miyamura burst into laughter, then he wrote his name on a piece of paper for Hori. So his full name is Miyamura Izumi, Hori thought to herself, feeling embarrassed and shy. Then she put the piece of paper away. Calling him Izumi made Hori feel shy. She thought Miyamura didn't know her full name, but he immediately responded with the correct name. This made Hori collapse instantly. The next day, Hori was assigned a pile of tasks by the student council, making her feel dejected. Yuki believed that she was being exploited excessively. Even so, Hori couldn't abandon her responsibilities. Miyamura and Toru could only stand by, feeling helpless. Through their conversation, we learned that the person who assigned tasks to Hori was Sengoku, a guy admired by many girls. Miyamura believed that Hori had a crush on him, which is why she helped him. After finishing her tasks, Hori handed the documents to a girl named Ayasaki, Sengoku's girlfriend and also a member of the student council. According to Hori's account, we learned that she was covering for Ayasaki because she didn't feel like doing anything. This made Miyamura worry about Hori's well-being. While he was lost in thought, Ayasaki suddenly rushed in and caused both of them to fall down. Miyamura quickly picked up the fallen documents, but before he could retrieve all of them, she ran away. He glanced at them and realized it was the accounting report. The next morning, Miyamura saw a crowd gathered outside the classroom. After inquiring about it, he learned that Hori was being criticized by the student council for the missing accounting report. Ayasaki hid behind Sengoku and refused to take responsibility, even though she received the documents from Hori the day before. Sengoku defended Ayasaki and accused Hori of losing the documents. Hori felt a bit doubtful about herself because she was exhausted the previous day. The crowd started buzzing in support of Sengoku. He demanded an apology from Hori, while Toru and Yuki could only stand by, unable to do much. Suddenly, Miyamura appeared and didn't allow her to apologize. He walked straight to Sengoku and hit him on the head, then presented the missing documents and recounted what happened the previous day. Ayasaki then realized her mistake and had no choice but to cry and apologize. After that, Sengoku's group also apologized and left. Miyamura later asked why Hori always followed Sengoku's orders, and while initially hesitant to reveal, she remembered her past when she mercilessly bullied Sengoku and he threatened to reveal her secret if she continued mistreating him. The next morning, during physical class, Toru mentioned Hori's upcoming birthday. Both of them were thinking about what gift to choose for her, which made Miyamura slightly concerned. That night, when Soda asked if Miyamura would still visit her after graduation, she felt a bit nervous because she was not sure about that. Finally, Hori's birthday arrived, and Soda gave her a painting he drew, while Miyamura gave her an album containing her favorite songs. They then watched the falling cherry blossoms together, signaling the end of the spring break. In the past, Miyamura has always felt lonely and no one wanted to be in a group with him during his childhood. When he reached high school, by chance, he ended up being in the same group with Hori. And at that time, they were still unfamiliar with each other. Hori took the initiative to start a conversation and gave Miyamura a warm feeling. Back to reality, the next class division list was out, and Miyamura continued to be in the same class as his friends. When it came to grouping, the isolated memories resurfaced, and he thought that no one would want to be in a group with him. However, Yuki, Hori, and Toru automatically approached him and considered it natural to be in a group with him. This deeply touched him a lot. When they went out to play, Miyamura asked Toru how he felt about him. Toru didn't hesitate to honestly mention the things he didn't like about Miyamura. However, he also acknowledged Miyamura's good qualities, recognizing that they contributed to his unique personality. Later, both of them were scolded by Hori for not completing their task during the outing. The next morning, while having breakfast, Ayasaki suddenly talked to Hori and directly asked if Miyamura was her boyfriend. Hori immediately objected, but Ayasaki told her that she would pursue Miyamura. Hori, imagining Ayasaki being with Miyamura, quickly opposed and declared that she wouldn't give Miyamura to anyone before leaving. Today, Sota went out to play with his friends, so only Hori and Miyamura were together. Since Sota started elementary school, the two of them had more private time together. That night, while watching a movie, Miyamura noticed that Hori's finger was dislocated. They compared their hands and Hori intentionally held Miyamura's hand. Miyamura also happily held her hand, and they sat close to each other. The next morning, when Ayasaki was telling her story about Hori to her close friend, Toru happened to overhear it. The scene shifted to Miyamura, who had a bruise on his face. Hori asked him about it and learned that he had just fought with Toru. Hori then asked Toru about the reason for the brawl, but Toru refused to answer. Recalling the previous night, Toru concluded to Miyamura that Hori liked him, but Miyamura didn't believe it. In an impulsive act, Toru rushed at him, and Miyamura reflexively bumped into Toru's head. In anger, Toru accidentally hit Miyamura, and in a reflex, Miyamura retaliated and dusted Toru off. And that was the reason for the brawl. The next day, while walking, suddenly a stack of documents fell from above. It turned out to be from the girl with green hair on the upper floor, the one from the student council with Sengoku. Toru then returned those documents, praising her for being diligent while they were talking. Returning to Miyamura, he was giving Toru the ice cream box that Hori had bought. But since he couldn't eat that flavor, both of them stopped Sengoku and asked him to eat it instead. While talking, Toru heard the girl's name, Sakura, whom he had just met. Sengoku also invited both of them to visit the student council room when they have free time. Toru and Miyamura then dragged everyone along and shocked Sengoku. While Miyamura and Hori were buying drinks, Ayasaki became curious and asked about their relationship, but Toru and Yuki didn't know how to answer, because they took too long to buy drinks. Sakura thought they were doing something else, which immediately disappointed Toru. Fortunately, Yuki was there to encourage him. Miyamura and Hori finally returned, and Toru thought that their odd behavior meant they were doing something suspicious, which made him very sad. But the truth was that they accidentally knocked over Toru's Coca-Cola bottle, causing it to spill everywhere. Seeing that, Sakura approached and handed him a tissue. In the evening, while studying together, Hori wanted to test Miyamura's level of shyness, so she asked him to show her the tattoo on his hip. He calmly took off his shirt in front of her, which greatly upset Hori because she thinks he is way too lenient. Miyamura recounted to Hori about his afternoon encounter with his old friend named Shindo, who thought Miyamura had a girlfriend because he often saw him together with Hori. Miyamura apologized to Hori for the misunderstanding, but she was disappointed that he wouldn't admit it. Suddenly, Miyamura received a message on his phone. When he opened it, he realized it was from Shindo, who was asking Toru to go join a two-couple date and reminding him to avoid getting Hori pregnant. Seeing Miyamura's natural reaction to his best friend, Hori felt that she didn't truly understand him. The next morning, while walking with Toru, Miyamura saw Shindo talking to Hori. He immediately ran over and slapped him. Then Miyamura briefly introduced Shindo to Toru and Hori, and the four of them went to a restaurant to talk. At that moment, Miyamura reminisced about his middle school days when Shindo was the only one who approached and talked to him. Despite their friend's advice, Shindo insisted on being friends with Miyamura, which Miyamura was grateful for. The next morning, despite having a high fever, Hori insisted on going to school. Luckily, Sota stopped her and made her rest, then he went to school as well. In her dazed state, Hori saw Miyamura taking care of her, thanks to a call from Sota this morning. When Miyamura intended to get a drink for Hori, she stopped him. It turned out that she had a psychological trauma from childhood because her mother always left whenever she was sick, busy with work. After understanding the situation, Miyamura held her hand and encouraged her. Before leaving, Miyamura told her to eat the food he had prepared in the refrigerator and concluded with "I like you." After Miyamura left, Hori couldn't believe what had just happened and stood up in disbelief. The next morning, even though she had recovered from her illness, Hori still chose to skip school. She didn't dare to face Miyamura after what happened yesterday. While Sota was on his way to school, he accidentally saw Miyamura laughing and talking to someone, so he told Hori about it in the evening. Hori was immediately surprised and asked Sota for more details, but he seemed to know nothing about that girl. Hori thought they were just friends until Sota mentioned that Miyamura and the girl were holding hands, which made Hori contemplate all night. The next morning, Hori returned to school. After talking to Toru, she went back to her seat without speaking to Miyamura as usual, which made Toru feel puzzled. He told Miyamura about it, but Miyamura also didn't know why Hori was behaving that way. On their way home, Miyamura initiated a conversation with Hori, which startled her. Hori was about to find a way to escape, but Miyamura recounted the memory from the previous afternoon, which made her stop. Hori also asked Miyamura about the girl he was holding hands with, as mentioned by Soda. Miyamura honestly answered that the girl's name was Chika, leaving Hori speechless. Seeing that, Miyamura retold the story from the previous day. Chika is Shindo's girlfriend, and that day Miyamura was only helping both of them walk home because they had fallen. Despite the explanation, Hori remained angry, threw a book to his face, and walked away. This made Miyamura think a lot. While Hori was still regretting her actions at home, Miyamura suddenly came to her house to visit. With no other choice, Hori had to invite him in. It turned out that Miyamura came to return the books that Hori had thrown at him because he was worried that she wouldn't have documentation for homework. Both of them thought the other was still mad, so they appeared awkward. Seeing that, Hori took the initiative to apologize first for throwing the books at him, and Miyamura responded with another apology for mentioning the girl named Chika too much. They both then apologized and confided in each other. Hori recalled the story from the previous afternoon, and Miyamura openly admitted everything. Suddenly, a guy named Kyosik appeared out of nowhere, acting naturally with Hori and initiating a conversation with Miyamura. After hearing him reveal that he is Hori's father, Miyamura was slightly surprised. He requested Hori to cook dinner and began questioning Miyamura. Before asking many questions, Hori brought the food. Although a bit weird, Hori's father was very humorous. He straightforwardly asked Hori if Miyamura was her boyfriend, and although a little embarrassed, Hori admitted it, which surprised Miyamura. Since Hori's father said he didn't like men with long hair, Miyamura proactively said he would cut his hair. However, Hori's father was only asked to tie it up because cutting it would be a waste. While Miyamura was having his hair tied up by Hori's father, he confessed his feelings for Hori. Miyamura's mother also arrived, and because of Hori's presence, she was worried they didn't prepare enough dinner, so Miyamura asked to leave. While they were walking together, Hori took the initiative to hold Miyamura's hand, and he quietly held hers tightly. Miyamura expressed his desire to understand Hori even more, and Hori had the same wish either. Before saying goodbye, they didn't forget to exchange sweet words. Now Miyamura knows what it feels like to be loved. The next day, while secretly observing Toru, Sakura was caught by Ayasaki. But Sakura denied it because she believed that beautiful people like Ayasaki couldn't understand her feelings of insecurity. Sakura quickly regretted what she said and ran to meet Ayasaki to apologize. This time, she didn't want to hide anything anymore, and Sakura confessed that she liked someone but felt insecure about herself. Ayasaki encouraged her upon hearing this, which deeply touched Sakura. When they were leaving, Toru saw Miyamura walking with Hori, and he no longer felt jealous, but instead encouraged Miyamura. The next morning, Hori invited Miyamura to her house, and they discovered that both of Hori's parents were home. Hori's father showed great friendliness towards Miyamura despite meeting him for only the second time. After having dinner, Hori's father suggested that Miyamura should stay the night. He initially tried to refuse but ended up accepting it. That evening, while sleeping in the living room, Hori's father asked Miyamura what he liked about Hori. And Miyamura honestly replied that the reason is she didn't judge others based on their appearance. The next morning, Hori opened the curtains to wake everyone up, and then Miyamura said goodbye to Hori's parents and went to school with Hori. Rumors spread throughout the school that Miyamura and Hori were dating, and some believed that Miyamura wasn't worthy of Hori. They even confronted Hori directly, causing Miyamura to stand nearby in contemplation. The following morning, Miyamura arrived at school with a completely different appearance, leaving Hori speechless. From that moment on, many girls surrounded Miyamura and approached him for conversation, while Hori stood by, glaring at him. When Miyamura visited Hori's house, her father was also surprised by his new appearance, and Shindo was no exception. Today, they had a meeting to talk, and Shindo brought many candies, but they were all peculiar flavors like cheese, clay, and more. While Hori was chewing on a candy, curious about its taste, Miyamura kissed her, just to try the flavor, then left without saying a word, leaving Hori with surprise. The next day, while sitting with Toru, Miyamura noticed a strange girl giving him a scornful look. While Hori was thinking about the previous day's events, the girl suddenly appeared and asked about Hori and Miyamura's relationship. Hori openly admitted it. The girl then walked away and sought out Miyamura, asking when he and Hori would break up, which made Miyamura unhappy. She introduced herself as Sawada and left. On their way home, Sawada followed Miyamura, which made Hori uncomfortable. When she directly asked Sawada for the reason, she unexpectedly learned that Sawada liked her, not Miyamura. Toru, who had been eavesdropping, also revealed himself. Sawada, while hugging Hori, doesn't forget to tease Miyamura. This angered Miyamura, and they both fought over Hori, with Miyamura claiming that she belonged to him, leaving everyone around them shocked. In the following days, Sawada and Miyamura continued to argue, and Miyamura had no choice but to distance Hori from Sawada. After school, since Hori went home early, Miyamura had to go home alone. Coincidentally, Sawada's route home was the same as his, and their houses were even next to each other, which made them incredibly surprised. As she had forgotten her house key inside, Miyamura invited her into his house. Through their conversation, Miyamura learned that his family consisted of only him and his parents. Sawada praised Miyamura for his caring nature, which made him happily laugh, and then she said goodbye and left. That evening, Miyamura asked his mother about Sawada, and through that, he discovered that Sawada's older brother had passed away last year. The next morning, the two of them coincidentally met again. As Sawada was leaving, three boys blocked her way and tried to flirt with her. She then turned to Miyamura for help. With just a glance, Miyamura easily frightened the boys away. That night, while watching a movie together, Hori's father went outside to buy cigarettes. When there were only the two of them left, Miyamura was about to kiss Hori. But Hori's father kicked the door open because he forgot his money, which interrupted them. As a result, Hori's father became the target of his daughter's anger, and she didn't spare any mercy in expressing it. Today, while they were taking out the trash together, Yuki invited Toru to go buy CDs together and promised to watch them together. Due to her close attitude recently, Toru had sensed Yuki's feelings since Miyamura started dating Hori. While lost in thought, Toru accidentally bumped into Sakura, causing her clothes to get dirty. While Toru went to find a towel for her, Sakura asked if Yuki and Toru were dating, although Yuki quickly negated it. But inside, she felt a bit worried. Toru later brought Sakura his own uniform, and she seemed very happy about it. She then went to the student council room and had a conversation with Sengoku, asking him why he liked Ayasaki. He replied that it was because she was vulnerable and needed him by her side, and she motivated him to move forward. Thanks to that words, Sakura decided to pursue Toru. The next day, Sakura returned yesterday's shirt to Toru and gave him some homemade pastries. Toru happily accepted them and praised their taste, making Sakura very happy. In a conversation with Yuki, Hori mentioned that Yuki had been avoiding Toru lately, and although Yuki tried to laugh it off, Hori knew that she was jealous of Sakura. Yuki even displayed that attitude in front of Sakura and Toru. After hastily accepting Sakura's pastries, she sat alone to eat and felt miserable for herself. The next morning, Yuki asked Miyamura to teach her how to bake pastries so she can give them to Toru, and he agreed. However, after a week of practice, her results were not very promising. While feeling flustered, Toru appeared and started eating the pastries. Despite criticizing them, Toru told her that he wanted to continue eating, which made her very happy. This week, Miyamura had to take a week off to visit relatives, and he didn't forget to message Hori to update her on his situation. The days without Miyamura felt excruciatingly slow for Hori, with only 2 days left until his return. Finally, the day of Miyamura's return arrived. Unable to wait any longer, Hori ran to find Miyamura, and he did the same thing. They bumped into each other at the elevator, and Hori couldn't hold back her emotions as she hugged Miyamura and cried. Today, Hori's group of friends had a conversation where they discussed Hori taking the initiative to do something while watching a horror movie with Miyamura. That evening, while watching a movie with Miyamura, she also tried to take the initiative, but due to Miyamura's cowardice, the outcome wasn't as expected. Feeling down, she retreated to her room, but Miyamura actively sought her out. He encouraged her, and they both watched the rain together. Hori felt a deep appreciation for Miyamura's personality at that moment and couldn't contain herself, leaning on him. They both then embraced each other under the cold rain. And that was the recap of the Horimiya series Part 1. If you enjoyed it, leave a subscription and a comment to motivate me to continue with Part 2. Thank you, and see you again in the next videos. One afternoon, Miyamura unexpectedly encountered his past self, who always wore a sad expression. Miyamura in the past appeared to despise everything, he even contemplated suicide. However, Miyamura encouraged him, telling him that in the future, he would meet cheerful, kind-hearted friends who would be ready to befriend him, especially a girl who would be willing to cry and laugh with him. Then he woke up with tears on his cheeks. The scene shifted to Sengoku, who always smiled but carried his own worries. Despite his fears, he was willing to do anything for the person he loved, which is why Ayasaki cherished him. Going back to the past, when Sengoku and Ayasaki hadn't known each other yet, Sengoku appeared indifferent to Ayasaki, even though she was famous for her beauty. However, when Ayasaki started a conversation with him, he happily responded and even proactively let her borrow a book. Not only did he treat Ayasaki well, but he also showed friendliness towards Sakura, which made Ayasaki happy. Knowing that she liked reading books, Sengoku invited her to his house to visit his bookshelf. That evening, they searched for books together and had a conversation. Sengoku showed his great knowledge about books and knew how to make Ayasaki happy. The next afternoon, Ayasaki visited Sengoku's house again, and while they were talking, Sengoku confessed his feelings to her. She then happily agreed to be his girlfriend. Returning to Hori, she was painting Miyamura's toenails when suddenly, due to an uncontrollable strange desire, Miyamura placed his foot on her head. Miyamura quickly realized his mistake and apologized to Hori, who wasn't angry but wanted to know why Miyamura was always gentle with her. She even imagined Miyamura getting rude, which excited her. The next morning, Miyamura acted differently than usual, trying to appear serious and rude when talking to everyone. Toru quickly discovered that it was because Hori forced him to act that way, because Hori loved Miyamura when he acted rude. Hori encouraged him not to overexert himself if he couldn't do it. However, wanting to satisfy Hori's weird interest, Miyamura took a bold step and threatened her, making the girl seeing that scared and run away. And Hori felt happy about that. While talking, Yuki mentioned that she had been confessed to a few days ago but rejected them because she didn't know them well. However, she felt a little guilty for rejecting someone without a reason. Hori came up with an idea to ask Toru to pretend to be Yuki's boyfriend so that she could face the person who confessed to her. Miyamura immediately called Toru, and Toru quickly agreed. Then everyone gathered and went to find the person who confessed to Yuki. Since they had to pretend to be in love, Toru took the initiative to hold Yuki's hand, and she silently received it, hoping that this moment would last forever. Later, the two of them arrived at the meeting point, and finally, the person who confessed appeared. His handsome appearance shocked Toru, Hori, and Miyamura. His name was Yagami, and he was a polite person. Knowing that Toru was Yuki's boyfriend, he took the initiative to say goodbye and leave. Immediately after that, Hori rushed to Yuki and asked her why she rejected him. It turned out that she felt uneasy because of his excessively handsome. During the conversation with Ayasaki, Hori learned that Yagami had very poor eyesight. Therefore, after school, Yuki proactively asked Yagami if he mistook her for someone else because she believed that she was not beautiful enough to be caught by his eyes. But Yagami honestly replied that he didn't, because he had been observing her for a long time. The Hori group also appeared, and at that moment, they realized that Yagami had extremely poor eyesight and constantly mistook people from one person to another. The next afternoon, after styling Miyamura's hair, suddenly some girls surrounded him and praised him, which naturally made Hori very jealous, so she hit him and walked away. As they walked home together, Miyamura unexpectedly encountered two old friends who used to isolate him in middle school, and they continued their old habits of teasing him. They even insulted Miyamura in front of Hori, which immediately made her angry, and she then fought them out. The next day, the old friend from yesterday coincidentally met Shindo, and we learned that his name was Tanahara. Shindo knew that, though Tanahara's words were a bit rude, he deeply cared about Miyamura. Back to Hori, she is demanding Miyamura to act rudely towards her to satisfy her strange preferences. Suddenly, Shindo appeared and blamed Miyamura for making Hori sad. With no other choice, Miyamura had to be rude to her to make her happy, and then they left, leaving Shindo perplexed. Hori later unintentionally encountered Tanahara's group, which immediately caused them to be scared. Suddenly, they saw Hori behaving obediently in front of Miyamura, which made them all fear Miyamura from then on. When they arrived home, Miyamura and Hori met Hori's father. Miyamura then made an appointment to meet him privately to discuss her peculiar preferences, hoping he could change Hori, but he could only encourage Miyamura to endure Hori. The next day, while searching for his phone, Miyamura encountered Mizuchi, who also liked Hori. Despite appearing indifferent, Mizuchi helped Miyamura find his phone. To thank him, Miyamura asked him to hit Hori to fulfill her strange preferences, but was refused. Both of them then encountered Hori, and Miyamura immediately displayed rude behavior towards her in front of Mizuchi, leaving him shocked. As a result, Mizuchi had a different view of Miyamura. Returning to Tanahara, he was in a dream where he was trapped with Miyamura, and Miyamura kept saying strange things, making him only feel terror. When he woke up, he immediately called Miyamura to say something, but Miyamura didn't answer. Therefore, the next afternoon, he went directly to Miyamura's mother's cake shop to meet him. Not knowing what to say, Tanahara just bought the cakes and asked to leave. Miyamura thanked him and said goodbye. On the way back home, Tanahara remembered the memory of when he used to study with Miyamura. He had once forgotten to feed Miyamura's rabbits, which caused all of Miyamura's rabbits to die, and since then, Tanahara had never dared to tell Miyamura the truth about it. It haunted him until today. While cleaning Hori's room, Miyamura found Hori's old yearbook and reminisced about his past. Although it was difficult, Miyamura wanted to become friends with Tanahara again because he believed that everyone deserved to be friends. The next morning, while walking with Hori, Miyamura spotted Tanahara, and somehow both boys had strange expressions on their faces, which made Hori feel jealous. It turned out that the two of them had just made up, hence the awkwardness. While they were talking, Shindo appeared and said something that caused a misunderstanding for Hori. Tanahara quickly took him away to avoid Hori's wrath. Hori then told Miyamura that she was jealous of him, even when he was playing with boys. This made Miyamura ask his friends to keep their distance from him. The next morning, while shopping with her older sister, Yuki encountered Yanagi. Later, Yuki introduced him to her sister, who was surprised because Yuki had rejected Yanagi's confession of love. After a while of conversation, Yanagi said goodbye and left. Yuki then met Ayasaki and expressed her thoughts about Sakura, worrying that Sakura might misunderstand that Yuki was dating Toru because of the fake relationship they pretended to have the previous day. Ayasaki encouraged her and left, but Yuki continued to sit there and contemplate her ambiguous relationship with Toru. In the following days, she decided to take a break from school, which worried her group of friends. Despite her sister's advice, she remained stubborn. Through their conversation, we learned that Yuki had a habit of willingly accepting unfairness and disadvantages herself to make others happy. Her older sister encouraged her, and as a result, Yuki became more motivated. She checked her phone messages and saw Toru mentioning that he had just been confessed to by Sakura. This shocked Yuki and left her standing there in a daze. The next morning, Yuki returned to school, and while talking to Hori, Toru asked her to talk privately. In that conversation, Toru mentioned his rejection of Sakura, which left Yuki with mixed emotions. She felt sorry for Sakura's courageous confession that went unrewarded. To Yuki, Sakura always brought positive feelings, while she felt the opposite about herself. The two of them then silently confided in each other, and during their conversation, Toru subtly implied that Yuki was an amazing girl and shouldn't feel insecure about herself. Yuki was deeply grateful for that. Going back to Sakura, she was happily chatting with Sengoku, and Sengoku also noticed a recent unusual cheerfulness in her mood. Sakura accidentally spotted Toru walking with Yuki, and although she hid her sadness behind a smile, she couldn't hold back her emotions and burst into tears when Sengoku encouraged her. Sengoku felt bitter about this love story because, in reality, no one in this story was at fault. Today, while the group was studying together, Toru told a story about the other day when he visited a classmate's house named Shu. He had a cute younger sister named Motoko, but she had a straightforward personality. Speak of the devil, Shu appeared, and they started talking together, including Yanagi. Hori mentioned how Yanagi always seemed more polite to Yuki compared to others, which made Toru feel a bit jealous. Shu appeared very friendly towards Yanagi and wanted to be called by his real name, and Yanagi expressed a desire to become closer to everyone. Sengoku also showed up, and the boys chatted with each other. The next day, Miyamura introduced Sawada to his friends. Toru and Sengoku tried to make a good impression on Sawada. Suddenly, Hori and Shu approached, and Shu immediately appeared friendly to Sawada. but it only made her feel scared because he talked too much. The next day, Shu accidentally caught Sawada carrying things, so he helped her. Sawada intended to thank him, but Shu, wanting to avoid her catching his illness, coldly walked away, leading Sawada to believe he disliked her. The next day, Shu recovered from his illness, and while talking with Hori, he noticed Sawada spying on them from outside the door. Suddenly, Shu opened the door and kept talking non-stop, making her feel scared and leave. But then, she glanced back and smiled. The scene shifted to Shu's younger sister's past, Motoko, who was being told by her teacher that she might fail the upcoming exams because of her academic performance. It made her feel discouraged, but Shu appeared and encouraged her, believing that her efforts were valuable and no one should underestimate them. Upon hearing those words, she burst into tears, and Shu gently patted her head and comforted her. The next day, Shu asked Hori to tutor his younger sister, and upon seeing Shu's affection for her sister, Hori agreed. The next morning, Motoko arrived at Hori's house and discovered Miyamura was also there. In the first session, Hori and Motoko would talk to get to know each other, and Motoko later opened up to Hori about many things. Meanwhile, Shu was preparing a lucky charm for his younger sister, hoping she would pass the upcoming exams. Christmas is approaching, and Miyamura is confiding in Hori that he might be busy on Christmas Eve and won't be able to come to Hori's house. Upon hearing this, Hori's father and Sota seem very sad. Meanwhile, on the other side, Toru is discussing his complicated love story with Shu and Sengoku. Toru feels a bit disappointed because he and Yuki still haven't officially started dating. Sengoku tries to encourage him, but Toru's gratitude seems insincere. The next day, Yuki meets Toru and expresses her desire to come over to his house to play games. Suddenly, Toru feels worried because something seems unusual at his house. That evening, the two of them go to Toru's house and he acts sneakily, fearing that someone might see them. Once they are in the room, Toru suddenly locks the door and loosens his tie, causing Yuki to misunderstand and blush. While they are frozen in place, a girl's voice resounded. Toru immediately blocks the door, but eventually, that girl manages to enter the room. She greets Yuki friendly and leaves. After hearing Toru's confession, we find out that she is Toru's maid. The next day, at the student council room, Sengoku encounters Ayasaki and her friends. She continuously invites Sengoku to come to her house on Christmas Eve, but he seems to be trying to avoid it. She ends up crying and as a result, Sengoku was scolded by his friends. In order to defend himself, Sengoku recounts his experience at Ayasaki's house. It turns out that Ayasaki's father likes collecting insects, which is why Sengoku was afraid to go to her house. On that evening, Hori is showing her parents her scores, and her results are still high as always. Suddenly, Hori starts worrying about the future because she is about to graduate. On Christmas Eve, everyone has their own activities. Miyamura unexpectedly appears at Hori's house. Even though he can only stay for a while, he is warmly welcomed. When walking Miyamura home, Hori expresses the emotions she has hidden for a long time, feeling that she still doesn't fully understand Miyamura despite knowing each other for a long time. Therefore, she wants to continue being with him even after they graduate. After a moment of silence, Miyamura promises to marry Hori. After standing still for a while, they both promise to take care of each other for the rest of life and bid farewell. The graduation day is approaching, and everyone is packing up their belongings at school to take home. Since Hori doesn't have much stuff, everyone has shifted their items to her to carry. Luckily, Shu suddenly appears with a few belongings of his own, so he ends up carrying the luggage instead of Hori. Meanwhile, the Sengoku group on the other side is organizing a trip to the zoo together. Yagami is about to get his driver's license, so he promises to take everyone on a trip after graduation. Back to Miyamura. He is keeping watch as Hori sleeps. Looking at this scene, he wishes time would stand still forever. Suddenly, he imagines a scenario where that accidental encounter with Hori on that day never happened, and his friends would be like strangers passing by, leaving him lonely and submerged in the dull years of high school. Hori wakes up, and Miyamura recounts what he had just imagined to her. However, Hori believes that even if that meeting didn't happen in the past, they would still find each other because it was destiny. Finally, the last graduation day has arrived. Miyamura runs up to the rooftop to gaze at the sky and catches sight of his past self, also present there. The two of them seem to be living in completely different skies. The past self then congratulates Miyamura and disappears. Teacher Yasuda is organizing a commemorative photo for the students in the class, while Sawada tightly embraces Hori because they are about to part ways. As for Toru, he is meeting Sakura, and they shake hands and thank each other for what has happened. Yagami is inviting Yuki and her friends to join him and the Sengoku group for a post-graduation outing. Hori's father also attends the graduation ceremony to congratulate his daughter. Although they no longer study together, Miyamura and Hori are still together. Miyamura recalls the memories with her and silently expresses his gratitude for how she has added color to his life. And that was the recap of the Horimiya series part 2. If you enjoyed it, hit subscribe button, and don't forget to let me know what is your favorite character in this anime series. Thank you, and see you again in the next videos.